are going to be together, race, and encouragement. So the idea of not being alone, of being with one another, having each other in our race. The fact that we are going to be in this race that we just heard about from Paul, where he was talking about how he has finished that race, and how we are able to encourage one another on this journey. And so that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. And really, this sermon came from a time where this summer I had started picking up running again. I had gone out of it for a little bit, and when you get back into running, you either have to post about it on Instagram or preach a sermon on it. So I don't have Instagram. Here we are. So I was preparing for this race, and because it is 2020 and things are more difficult than normal, I put in all this training, and it came time for a race, and well, there's really not races happening right now. And so I was going to go out and I was going to do my own. I had been doing this training. I wanted to do something, but it did not feel the same as a normal race day. Typically showing up, being there with other people, there's a specific start time. Really didn't matter what time I started. And I found myself actually really struggling to even get out the door and to start the race. And it was just a bummer because it just wasn't what I was used to when it came to the idea of races. So I get going, and about 3/4 into the first mile, I see these signs written in chalk on the sidewalk for somebody else running a race that day. Now, I was running a 5K, they were running a marathon, but all of a sudden, my entire mindset shifted. I have no idea who this person was, never saw them, or if I did, I wouldn't have recognized them. But all of a sudden, I wasn't running alone. Somebody else was running with me. And that just really encouraged me to see that and to know that. And so it really hit home that there would be a lot of spiritual applications for everything else, not just that race, but everything else we're fighting together. And it hit me that how much we rely on one another for encouragement. And this should not surprise us. This is something that we see in the Bible, even with the strongest of the spiritual heroes that we know about. Take a look at Elijah. So if you will, go ahead and open up to 1 Kings chapter 19. In 1 Kings chapter 19, to give you a little bit of context here, 1 Kings chapter 18 is the story that we oftentimes talk about when it comes to Elijah, where he's going against the prophets of Baal, and they have this challenge and this competition on who can have God start a fire for a sacrifice. Is it Baal who's going to do it, or is it Yahweh? And Elijah wins, and doesn't just win a little bit, he wins convincingly. Nothing happens for Baal. But when Elijah does it, he even mocks them by putting water on top of it. And not only did a little spark come down, but enough flame came in that it took all of the water. And so Yahweh has been vindicated. And so what you would expect to happen is that Elijah would be in great spirits after this incredible spiritual victory over the people that had gone away. And that's not what we find happening at all. In chapter 19, at the beginning of it, he is worried because Jezebel wants to kill him. And so he actually goes away, and you can almost see him laying down and just, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And he calls out and he complains to the Lord. And he's like, just let it be done. Let my life be over. And so we're going to pick up in verse 14, where God had just asked him, what are you doing here, Elijah? In verse 14 it says, he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. So again, why is Elijah so discouraged? It's not because God hadn't shown his power, because God had shown his power. But he uses this phrase of I only am here to serving you. He felt all alone in his battle. And so because of that, he felt discouraged. I think it's interesting what happens in this response. So in verse 15 it says, "And the Lord said to him, Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah, you shall anoint to be prophet in your place. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death, and the one who escapes from the same sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him." So we see here that God is giving a reminder that Elijah is not alone, that there are 7,000 other people who have not gone away from God, who are still in the battle, who are still serving God faithfully. And I had missed what had happened next until I was studying for this lesson. Keep reading, starting in verse 19. "So he departed from there and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen in front of him. And he was with the 12th. Elijah passed by him and cast his cloak upon him. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah and said, 'Let me kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow you.' And he said to him, 'Go back again, for what have I done to you?' And he returned from following him and took the yoke of oxen and sacrificed them and boiled their flesh with the yokes of the oxen and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he arose and went after Elijah and assisted him." It is interesting to me that part of God's solution, what God tells Elijah to do, is yes, there are 7,000 other people, but go and find Elisha. And now Elisha is going to be your companion in this journey. And that's exactly what happened. Elijah is no longer alone. Elisha comes and serves with him. And so we see that Elijah had that. Same thing happens with Paul. In 2 Timothy 4, 9 through 11. We know that Paul has no doubt about his salvation based off of the scripture reading that we just read. But notice what he tells Timothy here in verse 9. He says, "Do your best to come to me soon. For Demas, in love with this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. Luke alone is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is very useful to me and for ministry." I think it's interesting here that, again, Paul is wanting the companionship of Timothy and of Mark. He even goes on to say this idea of not just, "I'm excited to see you before I die," which I think is very much true, but he also says, "It's only Luke here with me. I could use more encouragement. I could use seeing you and Mark." And so again, this idea of us needing encouragement is happening to even the spiritual giants of the Bible. And we see it that Jesus needed that too. Look in Matthew chapter 26. In Matthew chapter 26, starting in verse 36, it says, "Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, 'Sit here while I go over there and pray.' And talking with him, Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, 'My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me.'" It's interesting as you go through the Gospels and you see Jesus, the one who, the disciples who he's closest to is Peter, James, and John. And he spends a lot of time with them. And here at the end of his life, what does he do? He says, "Come and watch with me. This is my deepest struggle. This is the night where I'm asking the Lord to take away the cup of trial that I'm about to go through. I need you with me." Even Jesus noticed and needed companions and wanted companions. Unfortunately, we see that they did not do as well as Jesus could have used. But it's striking to me that Jesus was asking for people to watch with him and to be with him as he's about to face this battle. And so God understands this about us, that we need encouragement. I think that's why the Hebrew author tells us that, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. And so we see that God gave us a cloud of witnesses, and that cloud of witnesses is the saints who have battled with us. That includes those who are mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11. But that cloud of witnesses is also one another, and how we are able to encourage and leave signposts in our race. And so with that in mind, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that these people who had left these messages did, how they had been an encouragement to someone who was going through a race. And the way that the scriptures, I think, follow up with that perfectly, and how we can do that, and then some lessons learned. So one of the first things that we saw there was they just had this message here that just said, "Tough girl, keep running." And, you know, when I looked at this message, and as I saw the messages in general, obviously there's something in the fact of what they chose to say, but there was also just something in the fact that they said anything at all. And what they were trying to do was tell this person as they're running that you are not alone, that you have people who are in your corner. And so they wanted to send that message of being there. And I think this is very appropriate for how we understand our races as Christians as well. You know, Gary up here, he has his laptop, and I see that 26.2 mile sticker. If Gary said, "Hey Josh, you know, I've got this marathon and I really need encouragement. I'd love for you to run this whole thing with me at my pace, and let's do it." I'm sorry, Gary, there is not enough love in the world that can get me through a marathon right now. And so we understand that even when we get together and we do races like some of us did last Thanksgiving, like we're not all going to be together throughout the entire journey. And so there are ways for us to put messages to let people know that they are not alone. And I think Paul does this in Colossians chapter 2. Let's take a look over there. In Colossians chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, Paul says, "For I want you to know how great a struggle I have for you and for those at Laodicea, and for all who have not seen me face to face, that their hearts may be encouraged, being knit together in love, to reach all the riches of full assurance of understanding and the knowledge of God's mystery, which is Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. I say this in order that no one may delude you with plausible arguments." Keep going with verse 5. "For though I am absent in body, yet I am with you in spirit, rejoicing to see your good order and the firmness of your faith." And so we see there in verse 5 that Paul is making the point that, no, I'm not there with you in person. I know that, but I am struggling on your behalf. I am with you in spirit, and I am fighting the battle. I am running the race with you. And so we may not be able to see each other, we may not be able to give encouragement, but know that you are not alone. I am with you. That's what Paul tells the Colossians. Notice what he also tells the Philippians in Philippians chapter 1. Verse 27. It says, "Only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of you, that you are standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel." And so Paul says, I want you to know that what you're doing impacts me. You need to be standing together in the faith. You need to be striving with one another, because I'm hearing of what you're doing. So whether I'm there, whether I'm not, what you do impacts me, because we are together. We are not alone on this journey. We are working together. And so that was one of the things that they were saying in their message. Another thing that they did is they had a couple of messages that talked about how difficult it would be to run a marathon. And I just picked a couple of them out. If it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. And another one that they said was, sometimes life is going to hit you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith. So you've got these two messages here, and really what they're doing is they're acknowledging that what this runner is going through is going to be hard. Challenges are going to come. They're not going to ignore and say, you know what, it's a piece of cake. Honestly, I don't even know why I'm writing a message. No, they acknowledge the fact that there is a difficulty in the journey. And I think this is important for us to be mindful of and to make sure that we understand and think about with other people when they may be struggling and anticipate what it might be. And it's kind of interesting because I think that God knows this about us and understands that we need this type of encouragement, that we need reminders that challenges will come. And so I think the Psalms really help us with this. So if you will, turn with me to Psalm chapter 12. It says, "Save, O Lord, for the godly one is gone, for the faithful have vanished from among the children of man. Everyone utters lies to his neighbor with flattering lips, and a double heart they speak." The world is evil all around us, and that can be really discouraging. We take a look and we see what it is that the world has turned to. I think we've talked quite a bit about that in Gary's class and the idea of sin and the ever-changing world compared to God's righteous standard. And we can look out and we can say, it's hard. Now, in the Psalms and what God has to say about the messages isn't, well, it's hard, so quit. But it does acknowledge the fact that things are hard. Notice, too, what Psalm 22 says. 22 verse 2 says, "O my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but I find no rest." Sometimes we may be wondering why God hasn't answered our prayer, or at least answered it in the way that we were hoping he would. And I think the psalmist, multiple psalmists have that same question. Where are you, God? Why haven't you answered my prayer? Why am I having to go through this? What is happening? There are challenges that we're going to face. There are going to be things where we're not going to know why God is letting it happen. And it's important that we be prepared for that and we be sensitive to the fact that not only are we going to face that, but our brothers and sisters are going to face that too. And finally, in Psalm 86, verse 14, "O God, insolent men have risen up against me. A band of ruthless men seeks my life, and they do not set you before them." And so we see here that David cries out about those who are going to attack him, that enemies are around trying to take him down. And again, as Eddie talked about in our class on discipleship, the war that we face is not about physical enemies. But we do have enemies that are trying to take us down. They are attacking us. They are looking for weak points. And so again, we need to acknowledge the different parts of the battle that may be happening. But that doesn't mean, again, as I said, that it's okay to just stop, to just quit in the race. Even just a simple sign of keep going. This is the direction. Just keep going this way. Or my personal favorite, and it was actually a very long thing, but I just got the tail of it, end of it. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Quoting Dory, the idea of don't quit. Just keep going. Your legs may be hurting. You may feel like you just want to sit down on the side of the road. Don't. Keep going. And so that is what we see in the New Testament. And we're told keep going even when we're facing trials. Take a look over at James chapter 1. In verse 12, it says, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him." What's James saying? You're going to face trials. That's in the book of James quite a bit. But stay steadfast, keep going, and you can overcome. Even when you're facing trials, even when it's hard, keep going. Even when you've lost your way. Take a look at Revelation. We're going to look at 3 churches in Revelation, the message that Jesus had personally for them. It says in verse 5, it says, "The one who conquers will be clothed thus in white garments, and I will never blot his name out of the book of life. I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches." So here Jesus tells them to continue to fight, to try to overcome. But notice what he talks to them, to the church in Sardis, starting in verse 1. It says, to the angel of the church in Sardis I write, the words of him who has 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know your works. You have the reputation of being alive, but you are dead. You're not on the racetrack anymore. You're not competing anymore. You have left where you're supposed to be. Get back up, run, and overcome. Even when you've gone off track, even when others go off of track, we need to encourage them to keep going. Even if they lose motivation, we see the same thing in verse, we'll start in verse 14 of chapter 3. It says, "And to the angel of the church in Laodicea write the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of God's creation. I know your works, you are neither hot nor cold. Word that you were either cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth." They'd lost the motivation. They didn't want to run anymore. Whether it was because it was too hard or just they got bored, whatever it might be, it was too long of a journey. But notice what Jesus tells them. In verse 21, he says, "The one who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne." Keep going. You've been lukewarm, stop it, and keep going. And then, even when things are going well, you have the church in Philadelphia starting in verse 7, and they've been doing great. But we have 2 churches in these 2 chapters that are doing a good job. And Jesus doesn't just say, you know what, I really only need to address 5 of you because 5 of you are having problems. The other 2, they're doing fine, so I'm not going to say anything. Jesus talks to them. He encourages them. And notice again what he says in verse 12. It says, "The one who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it. And I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name." And so even when things are going well, we need to be encouraging one another not to give up the fight. And so we see these type of messages, we see the encouragement that they were, and I think there was a lot of biblical application there. And so 3 lessons that I learned from this, and then the lesson will be yours. The first one is that we make a difference. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 through 25. It says, "And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." God designed the church so that we could encourage one another. And it's interesting here. He talks about consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. The idea is that we are being intentional about it. And he talks about how this is in connection to the idea of not neglecting to meet together. So one question that I've had to ask myself, and that I want to ask you, is when you came to service this morning, who did you consider? How were you considering to be able to help them? Obviously, this person who was running the race, they had friends who were considering how they could encourage, and they were very intentional about it. They didn't just write down anything, any quote. They picked quotes that actually dealt with the objective that they were trying to meet. I imagine that they probably picked a specific spot in the race because this is where it's going to start getting hard. We make a difference to one another, and we need to be considering and being intentional about how we can help one another. And, we see the idea here of using the assembly as a part of that, and that's very important. And we need to understand, both those of us who are here, those of us who are having to be more virtual or have more restrictions on our worship, that this time where assembly may be less does not mean that we need to do less of this. It means that we need to consider more, that we need to be thinking more about our brothers and sisters and how we can encourage them, and making sure that they are not losing hope, losing faith, and going away from the race. And so we are able to encourage one another. The second lesson is the idea that our actions help more than we know. Let's go ahead and turn over to Philippians chapter 4. What's interesting about what those people wrote is it had nothing to do with me. They don't know who I am. They don't know that I was racing that day. And yet it made a difference in my run. In fact, I had one of the best times that I've ever had. And from starting unmotivated, that made a difference. One thing that we need to remember about encouragement is that small things for one person may actually help a wider group than we really realize. For example, in Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 8, it says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things." And then down to verse 13, it says, "I can do all things through him who strengthens me." So what's interesting about this is these are passages that and phrases that we use a lot to encourage ourselves and to one another. There may even be some of these on a pillow or in a picture frame on your house trying to help bring you encouragement. Paul did not write that to us. He wrote it to the Philippians. And because of that, now we have this great encouragement that we can use for ourselves. But I think it's helpful for us to realize that when we encourage other people, we're not able to always tell who else is going to gain encouragement from those things. On top of that, in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 4, Paul talking here about the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. When God comforts us, it teaches us how to comfort others. The encouragement that we give somebody is an encouragement that they can then turn around and give to somebody else. And I think that again, is something that we may not realize in small things that we do. You know, one person gave Lacey some note cards, where instead of the passages talking about me or you or those type of things, they actually personalized it by putting in her name. That had nothing to do, again, for me. But it really encouraged me to see that, and it helped my meditation. And it helped me when I would go and try to help others to think about doing things in that way. The encouragement that we give to one person, we don't know where that goes. And so it's vital for us to make sure that we are encouraging as much as we can, even if it may seem like we don't have as much impact as we think. The final lesson that I'd like for us to talk about is the fact that we need to lean on Jesus. So, in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, where we started, talked about, "Therefore, since we are so surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us." We have this great support system. We have the saints of old. We have the saints here and now that can encourage us and help us. And I know that many of us are familiar with what's about to come, but let me remind you of what it does not say. It does not say, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses, let us run the race set before us, and let us put our eyes on the cloud of witnesses so that they can help us get through. That's not what it says. The cloud of witnesses is great. It is helpful. God knows that we need it, and he designed it for us. But what it says is looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. The amazing thing about this race that we're on is that Jesus already ran it. He came through and he came to earth and he ran the same race that we are running. And he too has left those signposts, those things of encouragement. And so when you're struggling, you can turn to him. I think it's interesting. It says, seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Remember what we looked at in Revelation 3:21. I'm going to go back and reread that again. Because he says, the one who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. The race that we are running, Jesus has led the way. Jesus has gone through everything that we've gone through. So if you're getting tired, if you're getting exhausted, focus on Jesus. And Jesus can say, yes, I've been there. I've asked God to take this away. I've had people revile me. I have been tempted by Satan himself in person. And I overcame. And now I'm sitting at the right hand of God. And just keep pushing. Because if you do, there's a spot right here for you to sit next to me. That's our God. And he is there for us every step of the race. And so we can gain encouragement from each other, but we should not forget the source of our salvation, the founder and protector of our faith. So let me ask, how is your race going? Have you not started it yet? Have you not come to God and partaken in the salvation that he offers? If you have started the race, have you grown weary? Have you maybe let your love become dim? Have you maybe even just sat down on the side of the road and said, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore? No matter where you're at, keep going. We as a congregation are here for you, and we want to help you in any way that we can. If you would like to ask for anything, we ask that you please come forward as together we stand and sing.